This is John McAllister, and with my program today, Me and Jesus, my guest is Jim Tressel, just retired from Youngstown State University as their president. Also, was the former head football coach at Ohio State University. He was the head coach at YSU at one time. Jim is going to spend time not on football directly, not on his presidency, but he's going to talk about, how he has worked in with his faith with Jesus Christ. Tressel was going to talk about where Jesus came into his life and the opportunities that he gave football players at Ohio State to further their relationship with Christ. Does a great job, very, as Coach Tressel is, down to earth. So if you sit back and enjoy my podcast with Jim Tressel. Coach Jim Tressel, as I said in my introduction, I'm so excited to have you on my program today.
Excited to be here. You and I go way back, and we've worked to try to help a lot of young people in our day.
I remember when you were an assistant at Syracuse, and I heard a rumor that that Gary Blackney used to beat you one-on-one.
Well, you know what? We played basketball at noon, but I tell you, the best player was Ivan Fears. Ivan, our receiver coach, and then he ended up being at the Patriots for probably 20 plus years with Dick McPherson, then with Bill Belichick, and just retired. And we used to always, Gary and I used to always say, if we passed it to Ivan, we never got it back.
Well, one more thing, I was looking through background stuff, and your last year at quarterback at BW for your dad was in 84? 74, because I came to Worcester in the football season of 77, I think, or 78. So we just missed. Your dad was an amazing guy. I sat with him. I know you know this, but I sat with him at a clinic. Coach Holman, those guys were pretty good friends. Tom was a excellent coach, by the way. And I was sitting with Coach Holman, and your dad is a good man. Funny and funny. Last thing before we get started, this is still in my office. You don't remember this. When my wife died of cancer, you guys sent me sent me flowers and this. And that was back in 2004. And there were a lot of people there, and I'm not so sure this didn't draw more attention than my wife sometimes. No, I'm joking. He said, "They got flowers from Jim Tressel and things like it was fun, good fun."
Yeah.
Coach, tell me about this. Is about me and Jesus, and it doesn't have to be anything drastic. It's not a evangelistic thing, but tell me a little bit about where Jesus kind of sits in your life and your background.
Well, it really ties into what you and I were doing for years and years, and that was coaching and trying to impact kids. And my high school coach was a guy named Tom Madsey, and Tom was from over in Findlay area. And he, when I was going into my junior year at Berea High School, he came to me and he said, "Do you have any interest in going to a Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp?"
Wow.
When you're a kid, you'll do anything the coach wants you to do. And I didn't know much about FCA, but I knew that if my coach thought it was a good idea, that I would take part. So myself and a teammate named Bob Colvin got in the car, and Bob's dad drove us over to Valparaiso, Indiana, which from Berea, Ohio State, is light years away.
Right.
And so he dropped us off and said, we'll see you at the end of the week. And we had no idea what we were in for. And it really was probably a turning point in my life for sure. I was anxious to be around the coaches, and there were pro athletes there, and it was just, it was a lot of fun, and I wanted to compete and so forth. And I was more than willing to do whatever else they had in mind. And so really at that time began my habit, if you will, of having quiet time in the morning, because at an FCA camp, you always had quiet time, and they gave you a Bible, and they gave you some things to read, and then we would react to them in what we called our little huddle groups. And then we'd have competitions during the day. But really what the impact on me was, every evening they had a featured speaker. And after being there 3 or 4 days, I was really starting to enjoy what I was learning. I'd gone to church and those kinds of things, but it was a little bit different. It was a little bit more related to sports, which really had my attention. And they had a great curriculum that we were following. But it was the Thursday night of that week that the speaker was Bobby Richardson.
Right.
Imagine, that time in 1968, I believe it was, or 69, Bobby Richardson was a hero of New York Yankees, second baseman in the World Series, MVP. And here we were going to get to hear from Bobby Richardson. And I'll never forget the impact that he made when he said to the whole group, if the game of life ended today, would you be a winner? And that really was kind of a halt in my mind. I knew the finality of winning and losing. If you won the game, you had to win forever. If you lost the game, you couldn't have it back. And then when he put it in context of your life, I really didn't know how to answer that question. And fortunately, he only made us sit there and think for a few seconds. You're not sure, simply ask Jesus into your life to direct your life, and seek him and learn and study him. And if you'll work to be like him, you can answer that question. When the game of life ends, you'll be a winner. And that's when my interest in learning about him and learning about my faith and spending time with my teammates and my coaches and having fellowship and spending time in prayer, spending time in the Word, learning as much as I could. So that changed my life, John. And to this day, if anyone asked me to look back at what was maybe the biggest turning point in my life, it was that evening that Bobby Richardson issued that challenge.
That happens a lot. The huddle, I don't think they're as involved. Maybe I'm not around it as much, but I don't think they push FCA, it seems like.
I think it's like anything else, where there's good leadership in communities and schools. They have good FCA huddles, and it's making huge impacts to this day. Other places that it might not be, but like any other activity, needs to be after school hours or before school. It's got to be voluntary. Right. One can mandate anyone going, and I remember when we were recruiting Joel Penton from Van Wert, and the head coach was allowed to have one home visit, and Joel wanted my home visit to be on the evening they had their FCA meeting. And so we were at one of his buddies' houses with, 20 or 30 students. And that was my home visit. And so I know it's going well some places, but, leadership is the key.
When I was at West Holmes, we had a huddle group and I started it. And Jeff Logan came down and spoke. Now, you know Jeff Logan. But he was like huge. And these kids will all go. And he was talking about being a running back and his life. And these guys went up to him afterwards and said, if you're a running back, He said, what do those linemen look like? He said, because I mean, they thought he was huge. Well,
Yeah.
how did you kind of work with it as you got into coaching, and you kind of work with that at those levels, Coach? How do you
Well,
tie in your belief a little bit with those that level?
one of the things that we always worked extremely hard was to find out what our student athletes' goals were. And so whether it was their academic goals, their football goals, uh, their personal goals, their faith-related goals. And so when we identified some people that had an interest in developing their faith, one of the things we provided for them was an opportunity to have Bible studies, FCA groups, athletes in action groups. We had a lot of people around our program who volunteered if someone was interested. Now, if someone wasn't, that's fine. And so we just like if they wanted to get strong, we provided a weight room. If they wanted to get smart, we provided a library. If they wanted to grow in their faith, we provided not just Christian opportunities, but we made sure that if they had a faith that was different, that they knew what was available to them on our campus. And every faith had, especially at a place like Ohio State, we had faith groups of all kinds. And so we wanted them to know when services were, when meetings were, what student groups that they might have a like interest in developing their faith. And so it was just one of the things. And you remember, John, we had what we called our block O of life, and
Right.
at YSU was the wheel of life. And we wanted them to set goals in every part of their lives. We wanted to provide opportunities for them to grow in every part of their lives. And we encouraged them to be the best they could be in every part of their lives. And that's why we were so proud that we were the top ranked academic team in the Big Ten. We had the most all academic Big Ten players because you know what? The guys that had really a big interest in being the best they could be academically, we wanted them, to seek that and so forth. It was very, I know they had Bible studies after training tables. Sometimes you'd see a group of people sitting over, getting involved in that. And we had good student leaders. I mentioned Joel Penton, but, guys like James Laurinaitis and Malcolm Jenkins. And we had so many guys that were good leaders. And, they didn't push anyone into coming and spending time with them, but they made it available. Say, hey, we're having a Bible study if anyone's interested. And so I always felt very comfortable offering opportunities for people to grow.
Well, didn't Roy Hall, he played for you, I'm pretty sure, right?
Absolutely, sure.
I'm thinking back. I ran into him last winter. He's involved with Ohio State now, somehow with Chaplin.
Yeah, well, he's got a foundation called the Driven Foundation.
Right. But
he works with young people, not just in their faith, but in their growth in many, many ways. And yes, he's one of the people. Jim Schmidtke is a guy that's been with Athletes in Action, and he's been one of the local chaplain with the student athletes of all sports, not just football. And I know that he has been mentoring Roy Hall in his growth. He and Antonio Smith began the Driven Foundation, and they've touched countless kids in urban Columbus, throughout the Columbus area, obviously on campus at Ohio State. But again, whether it was our program or Coach Meyer or Coach Day or Coach Mata or you name it, if a kid was interested in growing in that area, we pointed them in the direction, that they could have some opportunities.
Yeah, that's good. And Roy Hall.
Well, I know Roy spends a lot of time with them.
Right. I think that's probably it, Jim.
Yeah. Roy, I think he comes on Friday nights before the game. And if any of the kids want to go to chapel, like our kids on Friday night, if they wanted to go to chapel, they could do that. And we would have a different speaker all the time. Jim Schmidtke was our guy that would arrange the speakers. And we would get a lot of former players coming in, that just, wanted to share it was a tense time. It was
Right.
time, and it was always a good way for some of our kids to unwind.
Well, now I would tell you one war story for myself. It wasn't until, I was kind of like the fish on the hook a little bit, when, religion's there, and then finally I swallowed the hook a couple of years ago. But years ago, I remember when they used to have the football pro coaches would come in and work camps. And I remember going down to Dayton, and I think I I forget. I think Jim ran it, and I go to all these pro guys, and I look up, and there's this big, humongous defensive end sitting up there in the stands, getting ready to go. And Jim Place said, he said, "Hey, John, up there's Reggie White." And Reggie White and three other guys are praying. And I'm going, that's amazing. I mean, it was so, and I think what I'm leading into, Coach, is we seem to see more kids expressing their faith now, more players in all sports expressing their faith. And after the games, and even other teams getting together. And I think that's so huge. I mean, players from both teams, and they're pretty good football players, and they're also solid Christian kind of guys. So I think that's huge, Jim.
Yeah, well, when FCA started, for instance, I'll never forget. They said that their mission, if you will, was to confront athletes and coaches.
Yeah.
Through them, the youth of the nation, with the challenge and adventure of following Christ in their daily lives. That was their goal. That was their mission. Didn't mean that they beat people over the head with it,
right?
But wanted to propose it. And they felt that the podium that the coach and the athlete had, nowadays, sometimes the coaches have to be a little bit careful. They have to, as there have been court cases and so forth. And you have to really do a good job of making sure that you're not, quote, representing the school, and those kinds of things. Obviously, it's a lot easier at private institutions than it is public. But I guess the way I always thought of it, John, was I just wanted to provide that opportunity if the kid wanted it.
Right.
Didn't want it. Didn't change how we looked at him as a player, as a person. We didn't give him that choice in academics. We told him, whether you want to or not, you're going to get involved in that, and you were going to work to push the best you could be. The same with football, since we hired you, if you will, to come here and play football. But some other areas, whether it be community service or building their faith, going out and making a difference. We have that 2nd and 7 foundation where the kids go out and read. Well, they don't have to do that, but if it's something that they want to do, they want to help others. I always was very big on giving our guys a holistic approach, because I really believe that the more we worked on the whole person, the better football player they would be.
For sure, better person as well.
Absolutely,
and that's what we're hopefully shooting for. And they want to come back. And I read something that Jim Tressel said about you, and I think it's so good. He played for you, I think, at YSU, and he's the head coach at Akron-Hoban now. And I want to get it pretty close. He said, the more that you show that you care, the harder that individual's going to work for you. Isn't that a lot of your thoughts now?
Yeah, our thing that we had on our staff meeting room wall was what he was paraphrasing, and it was a quote that I always attributed to my father, but I'm sure he wasn't the first one that said it. It's, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
And they don't care about all your X's and O's and your wizardry and your genius and so forth until they know that you deeply care about them as a whole person. And, and Tim, is one of our guys that we're so proud of, that has gone on and done amazing things. And as you say, building good people is really what it's about. Yes, we want to win games, and yes, we want All-Americans and NFL guys and all that. But really what's important is what does the young person do when they leave and they become a part of society?
Okay, I have two more questions. One of them is, Jim, what are words that you live by? What would be words that you live by? You've kind of said it, but put it once and say.
I think, genuine care is what we tried to live by as coaches. And I think another thing we tried to live by is that we wanted to challenge our kids. We wanted to challenge them to be the best they could be and set high expectations and teach them to work hard and at everything they do. Work hard at your faith, work hard at you being a good family member, work hard at being a good community member, set high expectations. And so we wanted them to know that we genuinely cared. And we also wanted them to know we're going to expect a lot from them. Yep.
Okay. Coach, that's the last question, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And I was pretty close to being right. You're going to be able to make that meeting or whatever you're going to.
Okay.
With Ellen. What's in the future? What's in the future for you?
Well, I spent about 37 plus years in the coaching world, and then a little over 10 plus years in the administrative world. The reality in both those cases, those were 7-day-a-week positions. It's just what you do. And so the thing that Ellen and I would like to be able to do is be a little bit more available. That's the word that keeps coming in my mind. Available, meaning to one another, available to our children and grandchildren, available to our former players and friends and coaches, and see where we can add value at not just one place, but see if we can spread ourselves a little bit. And we've only been at this retirement gig a couple 3 months, and so far I've flunked retirement because I've been as busy as.
I was going to say, I bet you're busy.
But it's been busy in a little bit more available sense to some of our former players and coaches. And, I've spent a lot of time with Marcus Freeman and Luke Fickle and PJ Fleck and those guys, whether it be on the phone or Zooms or, whatever, just same thing with former players. And we still have our hands in our two institutions that we spent the most time at, YSU and Ohio State. But also we want to have a little bit more freedom, to do some of those fun things with family and friends and former players. So that's what's out ahead. I'm sure we'll figure it out. I'm sure we'll be too times and get it right at other times, but we're looking forward to it.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk again sometime. And but I really, really appreciate knowing you over the years. And my goodness, it's been a great relationship. And Ohio State and YSU, you've done a great job, Coach. I appreciate it.
You're one of those guys that I wanted to be more available to.
Yeah.
Here we are. We found an availability, and I'm happy we did.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. God bless.